Welcome to a muzzled chat. Folks, we have another Lyme warrior on the podcast today, and she's just got a really awesome energy about her. It just lifts me up. She's so positive. In fact, as I was trying to get some of the details, pre-show notes on her journey, she just didn't even want to dive into like the tough times much. And I'm like, well, we got to get to bring it credibility and to connect with someone. We got to dive into it a little here, but I digress. It's just a little about Heather here, and I'm really excited to have her on the podcast today. So welcome to a muzzled chat, Heather. How are you doing?
Hi, James. I'm doing good. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. It's actually pretty cool. I guess a little, I don't know, behind the scenes. I met this gentleman through one of the Lyme groups that's kicking off, I guess, some type of support group here locally in Arizona. He keeps saying that there's big things that they're going to get engaged in on really up in awareness. And I guess there's just a lot of positive things for the Lyme community around the corner. Only time will tell. But he set up the Zoom and met you on the Zoom, and you just seem... I was attracted to your light, and I was attracted to a lot of the things you were honing in on, which, yes, some people more so will see as taboo because they're frankly just not familiar with some of the methods and like muscle testing, for example. And I'd like to go into depth later on regarding that, because personally, one of my friends, when I mentioned that, they just had no idea. And for the first time, I actually found myself explaining it. And I'm like, this is something that has been integrated into my whole healing process through a whole bunch of doctors that are in the know. It's just awesome that, in my eyes, God is just setting us up to serve a purpose. And if we breathe light into anybody that's struggling, provide any solutions for anyone, or make further connections, that's what we're about. So with that, Heather, let's dive into your story a bit, like your journey.
It's been a crazy journey. I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet. And if you have questions about certain aspects, just ask me, because it's been a long journey. I got sick like at 30, didn't know what I had. But looking back, I had childhood asthma, allergies, digestive issues, like lots of sinus infections, asthma. But when I was 30, I started to have daily chronic pain. And I was labeled with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. Did tons of testing. Pain just kept increasing over the years, neuropathy. Had a spinal cord stimulator implanted in my back because the nerve pain in my legs was so bad. And I'll tell you later, like we know what it is now, but, ended up being put on medications for pain, trouble walking, trouble standing. By the time I was 35, I stopped working and I was totally disabled. Wow. I had been a dietitian, a diabetic educator, insulin pump trainer, had my own private practice, was starting to delve into holistic things like going to practitioners who did muscle testing. And if you had met me, I moved to Arizona 7 years ago. It wasn't until I was like 51, and I'm 59 now, that I had a doctor said, let's do blood test on you for Lyme. And so that whole time in between, I was just getting worse and worse and worse. Chronic acute pain and ate every day. There's so much more to the story, but most people know what neuropathy is like. So I had really severe neuropathy, had the spinal cord stimulator implanted. It did help a little, was on a lot of medications for pain because at the time I didn't know there were other options, for that. And at 51, we did an ELISA and Western blot. And it did, I had Lyme bacteria, in my body. I did not have the clear-cut CDC requirement for Lyme, but I was going to alternative practitioners, and they did muscle testing, and they muscle tested. I had active Lyme. I was familiar with muscle testing because I had been going to practitioners. And we did not treat the Lyme until my body muscle tested it was ready. And we did herbs, and I herxed. Like I thought I was dying. They did nothing to prepare my body, right, for killing things, which I do. And I didn't say to anybody, but I am a functional health coach, and I specialize in Lyme and mold and chronic complex conditions. But there's so many things I look back on my journey that practitioners should have done and didn't do, who were traditional Lyme literate doctors, holistic, alternative practitioners. But even after treating, I still wasn't better. Some things had improved, and I started coming off pain drugs. I was on 20 prescription drugs for 20 years. I came off every single one using a facility that did muscle testing and supported my body nutritionally. But I still was having trouble walking and standing. And so we moved to Arizona 7 years ago, and I was in a wheelchair and a walker. Lyme wasn't active, but didn't understand what was going on. And I entered health coaching school to try to sort of hope that I could figure out, right, functional health coaching school, what was wrong. And I really didn't learn what was wrong in school. It was another colleague during COVID. I was speaking in the Valley, doing talks, just general health coaching talks, but my Lyme resurfaced, and I didn't know Lyme could resurface. I really didn't want to dive down and really understand Lyme, but it resurfaced during COVID. And that same month, I developed mono and Graves' disease, hyperthyroidism. So I was a mess. Couldn't sleep, be awake 72 hours at a time. And, everybody tells you Lyme triggers Graves' disease. And so I'm blaming everything on the Lyme. Everything I blamed on the Lyme. And it was another health coach who reached out to me and said, Heather, I think you have chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And I'm like, what's that? And I don't know if your listeners have heard of it, but basically it's when the toxic bucket's overflowing. And it affects every system of the body. And it affects people very differently. But in the Lyme community, a quarter of us can't detox the waste products that Lyme, the bacteria, creates. And so the blood test for SIRS looks at that. Can you detox the waste products of Lyme? Can you detox mold? I couldn't. And it looks at other inflammatory markers. So I was diagnosed with SIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome.
Wow.
And I didn't know anything about it as a coach, but I knew where to research, and I knew you had to address toxicity, to get better. And actually my doctors who specialized in SIRS and Lyme and mold, I had SIBO. I was down to 10 foods that I could eat. They wanted to focus on the gut. And my head's going, well, if the gut's not working, you got to address the toxicity because the toxicity is damaging the gut. And my doctor and I are arguing, and you pay a lot of money to see these docs.
Yes.
And I did their approach. I did binders. I addressed the SIBO, and nothing shifted in 6 months of treatment. And I had done tons of IV ozone, 10 passes, but we were so focused on killing Lyme, but the Lyme was active because I was so toxic, and my immune system could not put the Lyme down, no matter how many. I did a year of IV ozone, 10 passes, like you name it, I had done it.
Oh,
wow. But once I found some other people who had SIRS, they didn't all have Lyme, but they had SIRS, and they were using a regenerative approach to detox, which was really keying in on how to detox with food as medicine and herbs. I really just took a step of faith because it was 43 months ago that I found the regenerative approach, and I was eating 10 foods, and it was mostly meat and like 3 vegetables and fat that I could handle. And nothing was healing my gut. And I had all this knowledge, and I spent over $200,000 by that point.
wow.
And I was so sick. And I started on the regenerative approach and using a protocol. And within 3 days, my body was starting to be able to increase the foods in my diet. I went from 10 foods to 11 to 12 every few days. And I'm like, it just blew my mind that we were sort of addressing everything, detox, alkalizing, bringing down inflammation at once. I was super sensitive to food. So my doses of what we were using food wise were tiny, but I was seeing things happen and I was detoxing and I was having symptoms, right, of detox, which I had never really experienced detox in my entire life because I had never done it.
Wow.
So about 3 months out, the brain fog lifted. I had really bad ligament laxity where I would actually go out of alignment. And I went to a chiropractor for 8 years. And I went 3 to 4 times a week because I would open a door or stand for 2 minutes and my vertebrae would move. And what I realized now is it's very common when we're inflamed and toxic. And it's very common when people have SIRS, and it can happen in Lyme just because of toxicity. But I always blamed it on, oh, the Lyme bacteria is right, it's damaging my ligaments. It wasn't that. It was that I was so inflamed systemically that my vertebrae could not hold. And it really wasn't a ligament issue. I did tons of prolozone, prolotherapy in the spine, hundreds of injections so that I could stand for a few minutes and not have. So it's a little crazy story. I've met people like me with Lyme, who have the toxicity component, and you can totally reverse that instability in the spine. So 3 months out, I didn't need the chiropractor. My brain fog had lifted. My Graves' disease early on was a thing of the past, and it's never come back in blood work. And I came off every medication that I had been on prior to even moving to Arizona, and pretty much was treating holistically using the regenerative approach. But it's been a process. It's been a journey, right? 23 months, my doctor said everything had been reversed. I had 20 illnesses, 20 labels. Many of them were reversed before I came to Arizona, but then the Lyme reactivating the mono, the Graves, by 23 months, she's like, you don't have mold, you don't have Lyme, all the loads in the body are really low. But what I didn't understand was, even though I wasn't sick anymore, I was still had a lot of parasites and a lot of toxicity from all the drugs they put me on. I was on 20 drugs for 20 years, not including childhood, over the counter. Yeah, just lifetime of drugs. So my body started dumping toxins at around 23 months like I had never experienced. And I went into almost 9 to 10 months of just dumping. And I don't know if your listeners are familiar with Cellcore binders.
Yeah.
Are you?
Okay, Cellcore is like the top tier.
Yeah, so I'm a Cellcore practitioner, but I needed 120 biotoxin binder a day. That's how much I was dumping. We have no way of measuring, right, what's leaving the body, but I needed a bottle a day of binder. And I think that's because I just took so much in my lifetime and I had never detoxed before, but my body was releasing it on its own. And I had to learn to just lean into that. And it was crazy. I was health coaching people through the whole entire healing journey.
Wow.
But deep detox was not fun. And I am good at recognizing it in clients and supporting them. But my body just went there and there was nothing I could do to slow it down. So since then, it's just been peeling away layers and all my organs have repaired. I had to go through the nervous system repairing, my lungs healing and repairing from mold. And the regenerative approach is really about giving the body the tools it needs to repair at a cellular level. And I think many approaches miss that, right? We're using supplements, man-made, manufactured things to help people. And we all need different things at different times. I'm not against those things. But to repair when you've been sick for 27, 28 years, you need plant-based nutrients on board. Doesn't mean you can't have meat, but I needed really high levels of amino acids and plant-based nutrients for that cellular repair to happen. And I'm 43 months out. My gallbladder is 99% healed. I've been releasing gallstones for the past month. It's so bizarre. I'm not taking anything. It's just, I've created this internal environment. that the body is releasing parasites and bacteria and gallstones on its own. But the gallstones aren't uncomfortable to release, but parasite die-off is a big part of Lyme. And when things die, it's not very pleasant in the body, depending on where they are.
Wow. You just went over so much. I'm sitting here trying to keep up, even taking notes so I can even absorb. But I mean, just to that last point, our culture has gotten away from like parasites really being an issue for whatever reason here in America. And everyone's got parasites. Everyone. And they are devastating.
Yeah, and in Lyme, I mean, you always get parasites.
Right.
And if people have Lyme and they're in mold, there's more dysbiosis in the gut. There's more opportunity for the parasites. And because I was undiagnosed with Lyme for 22 years, my parasite load, I mean, other than muscle testing my load and I can muscle test how many I had, but it's just been insane how much has left my body, some of which you see, and sometimes you never see it because it's not visible to the naked eye. But parasite testing in a GI stool map never picked up anything.
Yeah.
And I had BART really bad, and I got rid of it in 10 months, just using herbs and food. But that approach, right, has to resonate with people, you know, and not everybody's willing to. I have a lot of clients who stop when they're feeling good, and they don't continue to bring down the load of toxins, parasites, viruses, and bacteria in the body. So if they stop doing what they were doing, their loads start to go up, and then they get sick again, and then they're back seeing me. And I'd rather, you know, sort of lay the foundation to bring everything way down and then just have them do some basic stuff for maintenance. So that I never want my toxic bucket to be that full again. I never want to go through all that I had to detox out of my body. And I wish for kids out there, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, like I wish they knew how important it is to daily do things to support your body in getting rid of toxins, because we're exposed to I mean, I work with kiddos that are so toxic at the age of 6 or 7. You know, we're just exposed to so much in the air, the water, the foods we eat, things. Even if you're eating organic, I live off a golf course in Arizona. I'm being exposed to pesticides just because of what they spray on the golf course and stuff you don't think about.
The childhood vaccine schedule, even. I mean,
oh my gosh.
Yes, we need to look into everything. It's healthy to question things. And that's where, like, I want people to grasp for a moment. You went to very learned, like even Lyme literate doctors. And everyone's path is more unique. It's just a unique path. And I do feel with time and more stories like yours, we could hone in on, instead of all these narrow paths, you know, for each individual, we can kind of hone in on a wider kind of singular path that will benefit not just the Lyme community, but the Gen Pop as a whole. Because I look around and I see this level of deterioration and biowarfare, so many other things like literally happening from the air we breathe, the water, the food, the jabs going in arms. It's so many different layers to
those principles apply to everyone, right? So those principles of bringing down the toxic load, nourishing the body, incorporating some alkalinity in the diet. I'm not against keto. I did keto, I did paleo, I've done carnivore, but much more acidic when we're eating meat.
Right.
But incorporating alkaline foods in the diet to bring down inflammation. It doesn't mean you have to eat, you know, vegan, or I was pretty strict in my healing journey, but as I've healed, my diet's changed. And I can tolerate more, but I still try to keep a very high alkaline diet. And that's what's allowing things to die off in my body on their own, which to me is, I don't know, my goal with clients is I want to help your body do what God designed it to do.
I like that.
And it's just sort of crazy. If I hadn't experienced it, and I think I told you this, but we didn't say it on the podcast. If I had an experience like parasites dying and seeing them in the toilet, feeling the die-off, being able to muscle test that I was having high loads of parasite die-off. I wouldn't have believed that you could do that with diet because I had to do lots of anti-parasitic herbs on the healing journey. But now they just die on their own. And that's what you want. And I'll be glad when everything's out of my body that, that there isn't stuff dying. But
Right.
I want people to know illness is about the toxic load, the heavy metal load, the parasite load in the body, the bacterial load, not just Lyme, but other bacteria, other viruses. And when those loads are down, the immune system can do its job and people reverse autoimmune diseases. They don't get autoimmune diseases when those loads are low. We don't get sick when we're not acidic. And it's not that hard to do. It's just, you got to want it. You got to want it. You got to be motivated. But the process of healing can be, and it depends on the person. My story was very uncomfortable, lots of symptoms on the healing journey, but I always knew that the symptoms were normal. So I encourage clients not to focus on, this ache or pain, because you're going to have symptoms on the healing journey, and we're not in. God's in control of the journey and the timing. I really thought, I would have been done, sooner. My friends have watched my journey, but I'm not in control of how long the journey takes. I'm just in control of my attitude and what I choose to focus on. I'm not in control. We're not in control of the symptoms we have on the journey. Everybody's symptoms, when they're having detox or die-off is going to be different, but we do have control how we support the body and how we think about what's happening in the body. And so, I've chosen to say, hey, I'm healing. Well, I'm already healed, but my body's still doing some work. I don't have Lyme, but my body's still doing some work from 29 years of illness.
Wow.
And, anybody who's older, there's more layers of that onion to peel away. And when people are younger in their 20s or 30s, or they haven't been sick very long, they're so much more resilient, and they bounce back quicker if their doctors and people aren't missing, if we're not just focused on killing, if everybody's just focused on killing, you're not getting better, you're missing the nourishing and the bringing down inflammation and opening the detox pathways and gently detoxing, whether you do it with food or you do it with supplements that are whole food binders. It makes me upset what gets missed. And if you're not ruling out mold in your environment when you're trying to heal and you're not getting better, I get so upset when clients are referred to me and they've been working with often other coaches who are missing that they're in mold. And I'll say, if they're not getting better in 30 days, they're in an environment that's toxic. And I've seen families that were referred to me that were in mold working with practitioners for 4 years. So my heart is, I want to educate individuals and practitioners that how to recognize, and everybody who has Lyme should be testing their home.
That's essentially the point I was trying to make regarding even the learned, Lyme literate doctors you saw before. Like what better education is there than someone that's walked the walk, someone that's found the solutions for themselves and actually led to breakthrough, and now is spending the time necessary to individualize for folks to really hone in on the roots of issues such as mold and whatnot. And that's where I believe, to tie in and go more in depth on muscle testing, that to me seems to be a pretty invaluable tool.
I love the muscle testing, and I'm a little over the top with it. My doctor muscle tests, but my doctor trusts my muscle testing over hers because I do it so much. But when I work with clients, I like to muscle, and this is something I came up with on my journey to help me see progress, because I had symptoms the whole healing journey, even though many things were improving, like my ability to walk and stand. But when you have detox symptoms, you don't feel good. So you want to see that you're making progress. So I will muscle test people's toxic load, and I'll just say 0 to
Yeah, could you explain muscle testing and your method, like what you have found most
I'll do the best I
works good?
can. I don't know if I do the greatest job explaining it. I mean, chiropractors do muscle testing or applied kinesiology. It seems a little woo-woo, if you've had it done. But basically when chiropractors do it, and I learned to do it on people in person, you're touching, say, on an organ like the thyroid, and you're looking for a strong or weak response. And
Hmm.
if you get a weak response, like the arm goes down, that's a sign that that organ needs support, that it's needing help. I've learned how to muscle test virtually, so I can look at you, James, and I could muscle test your toxic load, your heavy metal
Wow.
load, the mold load. And because I've done it with all my clients, I know what high loads are. But if people want to do a test, we can do a test. I
Yeah.
just spent so much money on the healing journey, and most of my clients have, that if they trust my muscle testing, we can back it up with testing if they need it, for
I
sure. But
do. I'll testify that virtually it can be done. It could actually even be done over the telephone. Like people, we are tapping into proof for those out there, not even muscle testing related. At the point you just have that random thought, man, that ex college roommate just popped in your head, or, just a distant cousin or friend or foe, even. And then next thing you know, they reach out. Like it's unexplainable. There's connections, but in person, I can testify. I try to be strong and take care of my body. And I remember this situation right up there in Rexburg, Idaho, seeing this old timer chiropractor doctor, and he was muscle testing me for all these supplements and herbs and even some homeopathics. And I just remember vividly being like, I'm gonna get him, like, on this one. Like, I'm gonna hold my arm out. He's not gonna be able to budge it. Like, and it's crazy because I part of my thought process was like, oh, I tested really strong for this one and this one and this one, and he's just piling it up. And I think part of me was like, I just saw all these dollar bills flowing out of my wallet. Like, I'm gonna have all these freaking supplements. So anyway, like this one, I don't know. I'm gonna fight and see
you're going to try to
what.
prove him wrong.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to prove him wrong. But anyway, I just held out my arm as hard as I could, and this guy was. It was just, and he's an older gentleman, and he was manipulating my arm like I was just a twig, and
Yeah.
it really opened my eyes to, there's something to this. Like, your body is essentially manifesting in a way through strength. Like, hey, this will boost your system, or through weakness like this. Yeah.
Muscle testing, people do it differently. There's different techniques. So if I'm doing something
Right.
on video, I do something called the O-ring technique. But so I'm using my muscle, and looking at you to get a response, a strong or weak response to my question. Um, but you have to make sure you're hydrated. Certain things, you don't have a cell phone on you. Certain things can interfere with the person doing the muscle testing. But some people will just muscle test. Does a product resonate with the body? Like, does my body want this supplement? And I'm getting a no holding this, and I can just think about it. I don't need to hold it. But when I muscle test people, I will ask, is it a priority? Do you need it right now? Is it going to be highly beneficial? Instead of just seeing what resonates with you, because say you want to take cat's claw for Lyme, it may resonate with your body that your body likes it, but doesn't need it right now, right?
Mm,
Is it a priority? And so sometimes if people, depending on what they're thinking in their head or how they're doing the muscle testing, can
right.
impact how much they're giving you, where I really try to hone in, is this a priority or is this highly beneficial? With my clients, I don't want anything that's not beneficial and not highly beneficial when we're getting started. And I'll
Wow.
sort of outline what's priority number one, what's priority number two, based on what I know as a health coach and what I'm also verifying. With muscle testing, it just sort of hones in on a protocol. So it takes a lot of guesswork out of it, because you're not going to muscle test typically for something that, you're going to react to in a negative way, like an allergic reaction. Like, yes, you may herx from something that kills Lyme or bacteria, but it's going to just resonate, what your body needs versus what my body needs. And I just love that because it can make the approach very personalized and really cut down on wasting money on things that aren't going to work. If people are comfortable with the muscle testing, because it is, I had a gal message me today saying, I really don't understand this muscle testing thing. And I can send them an article explaining it.
Right.
And then they have to decide, are they comfortable with me muscle testing them? And if they're not, I want to honor their wishes, right? And then not muscle test them and just use my knowledge as a health coach. But when people have symptoms like detox or die off, I can muscle test. And a lot of times, I don't know what symptoms you've had on your healing journey, but people get a rash and they're like, oh my gosh, I have mast cell, I have histamine issues, I'm allergic to that. And a lot of times they're wrong. Sometimes they're right. But with the muscle testing, if they're telling me they're reacting and we get on a call and I muscle test their symptom, and I can muscle test, is it detox? Is it die off?
Right.
Is it a histamine reaction? Is it mast cell? And if they respond to what I'm suggesting, how to handle that symptom, and they respond, then they start to believe, right, that what I'm doing is working and I'm hitting the nail on the head. It's a little different, but it's been so helpful with people who are really, really sick because we have so many symptoms on the healing journey. And it gave me peace of mind to muscle test myself and go, oh, this nerve pain is parasite die off. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but nothing's wrong. My body's doing what it's supposed to. And then I'll muscle test, what do I need to do to support my body? Do I need a binder? Do I need some inflammation support? And I've trained other practitioners to do that as well, but it's just so I'm like, and you can do muscle testing.
Personalized instead of just some generalized protocol for someone that, oh, maybe the protocol ended a little short. That individual needed a little longer to have that breakthrough, or someone in the midst, halfway through the protocol, like that, half of the things are no longer really necessary or a priority for that individual, but there's these other things. That's where it could just be so individualized, and I like that, because one supplement you might not even need more a refill even on that, where it's just that tincture and
and dosing is so helpful too. Like I love Cellcore. It was a huge part of my journey. The regenerative part was 80% of it. And then Cellcore further down, I couldn't tolerate Cellcore in the beginning. It was way too strong. So I couldn't even touch that till about 14, 16 months. And I was using food to bind, not Cellcore. But muscle testing what I needed for Cellcore. Like some people, right, they just go through step 1, step 2, or, step 3 and step 4. Where I never needed step 3 until the end of the journey, which was the heavy metal detox. My body let go of heavy metals a few months ago. It just was dumping them. But I didn't need them in the sequence that Cellcore recommends it because my body wasn't muscle testing for it. But being able to muscle test how much binder you need can really help when you're having pain or having symptoms of detox to get the dose right and to be able to ask, like, do I need to dose higher to mop up these toxins? So I've had a lot of fun, and you can do muscle testing for other things like what colors look good on you. Even my office, I painted my office. I don't decorate, but I was able to match the color swatches to the picture in my office and muscle test what shade, right? Match the picture the best. So you can actually have fun with it and do it for other things too, I've discovered. But I mean, mostly I use it with clients.
Well, the reality is, like, for any skeptic, it's common practice in a lot of, not just Lyme, for like you were just touching on, so many different things. And there is proof before folks' eyes or ears if you're just listening in. And you're it, Heather, because you went decades on all these drugs. You went decades in pain, disabled, in a wheelchair even. And it sounds like at the point you were here, I mean, it actually seems like it became a relatively quick turnaround for you.
Once I discovered
Once.
the regenerative approach, which was
Yeah.
using food to nourish, to alkalize, to
Right.
support detox pathways, which nobody is doing.
Can we hone
Nobody's.
in on that a bit? I know you mentioned some things in the cell core, detox binders, things of that nature. What else do you attribute for you personally having like these breakthroughs?
Yeah, so for me, it really was the regenerative nutrition. I mean, it was the protocol using regeneratively farmed, which means the soil's nutrient dense. They follow very specific practices.
Mm,
We have regenerative farms in every state. Arizona has them if you Google a regenerative farm near you. But those foods that are grown on a regenerative farm, the nutrient density in the soil is so much higher, where 99% of the US soil is so depleted. So the plants that are grown at that regenerative farm is just going to be have so much more nutrition. So I'm using an organic, regeneratively farmed superfood protocol. That's what I was introduced to. I've aligned with that company and use it with those people who muscle test that it will benefit them. But for me, who was sick for so long, it was nourishing me at a cellular level. I could not eat or digest food well. I had SIBO, I had high parasite load, I had a lot of gut dysbiosis, and had so many digestive symptoms. That's why I
mm,
had gotten down to 10 foods. Um, so being able to have a liquid shake, the right one for me, liquids are easier to absorb and to digest and to assimilate. But these weren't things that people typically eat, right? People don't eat chlorella, spirulina, but very alkalizing. Alkalinity, things can't thrive in alkalinity. And when we're sick, we're acidic. So it doesn't matter if it's Lyme, mold, or something else. And this is part of the regenerative approach. The regenerative approach is about addressing acidity in the body. So the easiest way to address acidity first is to shift our diet to a more alkaline diet. And everybody's different. When I got started, I was keto. So keto is much more acidic, but I couldn't eat
wow.
anything else. So I was adding in these alkaline superfoods, and my gut, and part of that had a gut protocol within it that was super, whole food, gut support, vegan amino acids. And my gut started healing. I was seeing shifts in a few days that my diet, I could add in a piece of fruit. I couldn't touch fruit for 2 years, but it started out right, baby portions of one food and things just expanding. But the regenerative nutrition for me is a game changer. And then teaching people how to eat, to detox, and to alkalize, nobody's doing, right? Everybody says eat keto, eat paleo, eat carnivore. And I've had some doctors who don't want to talk to me because I ate to heal. I ate just fruits and veggies. I didn't even eat grain. I was so
Mm,
sick that to detox and support my body detoxing, I personally had to do just fruits and veggies, organic superfoods, amino acids. I was getting my healthy fat. And I even did 3 months of just fruit. And I had the
wow.
most healing that 3 months, but I was ready for it. I don't force patients to do all fruit. You can tell when you're ready, you're craving the fruit. But
Mm,
fruit's a great way to detox, alkalize, get the lymph moving. But these are not things I learned, right, in health coaching school. These are things I learned working with practitioners who use the regenerative approach, and working with clients. So
wow.
it's so simple to make those shifts at your own pace, right? It took me a few months to get off keto and shift over to fruits and veggies. And as I healed, I was able to add more foods in, and I became, as I was no longer sick and toxic, then I was vegan and having more carbohydrate, but trying to choose more alkaline carbohydrates. And now I've added in some meat and some fish, cleanly sourced. I don't really want meat. I don't crave it, but my body's needing it, right?
Mm,
My body right now is needing it. Um, and so I teach people, listen to your body, right? Don't do what Heather did, but I have guys who are like, Heather, I can't do fruits and veggies. I'm like, you don't have to. We can eat meat, but we do have to increase the alkalinity, and using these regeneratively farmed superfood shakes, it's like 6 superfood salads, in a glass. And you can't find that kind of stuff at Sprouts or Whole Foods. You can find superfood shakes. They're organic, but they're not regeneratively farmed. And that's the difference. And so the company that I use, they're farmed, and then they're picked at the peak of ripeness. And then they're wind dehydrated on the farm that day. Their farms are 100 miles from industry, and they've been organic 30 years. So they're partnering with local farms. One of their big farms is in Utah, and it's a 97-foot deep old lake bed. But I mean, even if I go to the regenerative farm out near me in Arizona, it's 2 miles from Route 10, So even though it's an organic and a regenerative farm, they're not away from industry, And I never thought about that. But when you're working with people who are really, really sick and the needle's not moving, it's amazing what happens when we're nourishing at that cellular level and alkalizing. And most people, I can guarantee they're going to start to detox on day 3. And I always check in with them on day 3 if they're muscle testing for the nutrition piece of things. But it's pretty amazing. Wow. And like I said, everybody's different what they need and what they want. But for me, being sick so long, that nutrition piece was really huge. And when you're sick a long time and you get into repair mode, when you have Lyme, most people, their nerves have to repair from the damage that Lyme bacteria has done, parasites have done. When I went through nerve repair, I had to eat to repair the nerves. I had to shift what I was doing and not eat for detox and eat for nerve repair and have more, healthy fat, and totally shift what I was doing. And then my support for my nerves repairing totally had to shift too. The outside tools, that I was bringing in had to shift. So I like the muscle testing for people because we can muscle test what tools do they need, right? Does their body need an Epsom salt bath, or does it prefer sauna? Do you need hyperbaric? Will it benefit you? But we can muscle test that instead of spending. People can still go and do it if I get a no, but that's their decision. But for me, my doctor will say, Heather, let's muscle test if you need this, this, or this. And then whatever I muscle test is the priority. That's what I go with for myself. So that's how I did my whole entire healing journey, with muscle testing, myself. Otherwise, I think I would have been calling my doctor every week because there was always some crazy symptom. And I started to be able to muscle test, what my symptoms were. But the nutrition piece is huge. The nutrients in the shake support, right? Stage 1, stage 2 liver detoxification, because we've got those like cruciferous vegetables that are wind dehydrated in the shake. So a lot of the things that people are doing for detox with supplements, we can do with food, or we can do with whole food supplements like Cellcore. We can do with herbs to support the detox and drainage pathways. If people are killing parasites or Lyme, and I see it all the time with clients, their doctors putting them on an antibiotic or herbs, but nobody's checking their pathways, making sure they're pooping. If you're not pooping once, you should be pooping at least once a day before you start killing, because everything needs to be able to leave. And the lymph is congested when you have Lyme or any chronic illness. So everybody I meet needs lymph support. And that can be from lymph herbs to dry brushing to rebounding or movement, lymph massage. It just depends on the person, right? How much support their lymph may need, and making sure their liver and their gallbladder, is supported, and does their gut need support, and does their adrenals need support. But to go in and just kill, and that's what my docs did with me, right? We went in and killed with herbs, and I think the Herx was so awful because I didn't know I was living in mold, and we weren't opening my detox and drainage pathways. We were just going in and killing with herbs, which was very effective. But I felt like I was dying when I was going through that. And I think it would have been a lot better if I hadn't been in mold and I had known it was in mold. And, if we had worked on my pathways first. You still can have your symptoms are less, but you still can have symptoms on the journey, even if everything's perfect, right? The environment's good, your pathways are open, you have bowel movements every day, a few times a day, you still can have symptoms on the journey because detox and die-off are creating temporary inflammation as things are, leaving the body. And so then it's just supporting you through those symptoms.
Wow. Well, that's a lot, but and I know for some there's like, oh, where do we? It's simple. We could just tap in to your knowledge. I'd imagine you're more even a financially viable option than a lot of these other doctors and protocols. And instead of just shooting, I don't know, into the dark, you're really prioritizing things.
It's much more economical. I mean, we all need a doctor on our team. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my doctor. I do. She's been a part of my team, and I needed her on the healing journey toward the end. But her approach to detox didn't work for me, and didn't get me better. People have to discern whose approach do they want to follow. Do they want the support of a coach who can come alongside them, who's been on the journey, who's walked through it, who can recognize the symptoms they're having? But you're still typically going to need a doctor at some point, right? Even as a coach, I can order blood work through through a lab that I'm affiliated with if people wanted Lyme testing. But most of the time when I see clients, they've already had all that done. They've already had all the tests. And I think people get a little overboard on the testing. Personally, I had all the tests. I didn't know any better, and I've done GI stool maps and functional tests. But sadly, my docs at the time who were using the tests missed things looking at the test. Now I can go back and say, oh my gosh, that would have shown them on the GI map that I was in mold. Like just by looking at, I had no lactobacillus in my gut, which mold will wipe out. But they didn't know that. So they're just putting me on probiotics, and they didn't muscle test for the probiotic. And we weren't addressing why my lactobacillus was so low, because I was toxic and I was being exposed to mold in my previous home, my childhood home, and in my new build in Arizona had mold. So if we're not addressing the root, then treatments are they're just covering symptoms like drugs do. So even supplements, and that holds taking a ton of supplements that people do for Lyme. I did that, and I wasn't getting well, right? I was still sick. And I was doing good whole food supplements, but we were missing the environment and opening pathways and addressing toxicity and bringing down the parasite load. And they're not hard. They're not hard things to do. But like I said, the way I'm doing it is very different than most practitioners are doing it.
Well, something has to be changed because, I mean, we're both from Pennsylvania, or at some point or another, we lived there and we had tick encounters. Our animals had ticking, ticks on them. Neither of us dealt with a bullseye rash. So to really like hone in, all we can reflect back on is, the earliest onset of like symptoms and, how we personally were impacted. And then throughout the time, how it more so became chronic and life-threatening. But something's got to shift. There's so many of us that are just downright suffering, and that's where I personally feel muscle testing and people's personal walks and what's led to breakthroughs like that has more weight. There's more value in my eyes in that than the most educated, learned. Now, there are doctors out there that continually eat humble pie and are out there actually practicing medicine where, something, they're not insanely practicing where they're just continually doing the same thing, expecting different results, So it's just important that we don't fool ourselves and are more aware as to these things so we can effectively hone in on what is going to benefit us the most. Now, you clearly are a wealth of knowledge, Heather. And so you have a webpage and
yeah, it's healthcoachingbyheather.com. And I can Yeah, send it to you for the chat. And I have a
Yes.
link tree that there's a lot of good resources on my website,
Okay.
and there's a lot on my link tree. The link tree doesn't match my website yet. I have
Okay.
to update things. So there's a lot more on my link tree that's different from my website. So they both have some good info if people want to look at it. But I really encourage, if you have Lyme, rule out mold in your environment or your workplace or your school, depending on your situation. And just be sure that whoever you're working with is addressing, opening up your pathways. They're addressing increasing some alkalinity in your diet, and that they're addressing detoxing the body, because a lot of times the focus is very much on killing or binding. But if we're
Mm.
not opening up pathways, we don't want to bind and kill. And if you're in mold, it's going to be a miserable process. Depending on the level, people are going to be much more symptomatic. So you have to really, if people aren't getting better or seeing some positive shifts in 30 days, something's missing. You're going to have symptoms on the journey that are unpleasant and uncomfortable, but you should see things improving. Like my walking improved, my diet expanded, even though I was having detox symptoms, and nothing before was doing that with the protocols, I was doing.
It's crazy. And that goes for all of us. You mentioned for especially, yes, those fighting Lyme, but all of us need to take this more serious, because I know as we hone in on just this, because I just see too much people just struggling, like the world is just crumbling down and they can't shoulder anymore, and it's even just hindering their quality of life on walking around with a smile on their face in the encounters, and just we shouldn't be grinding through our days and being excited for this gift of life and all our moments, like that's the natural state of being. So if you're not walking around just full of life, there's improvement to be had, and
Yeah.
we need to be able to acknowledge that and hone in on that. What
Yeah,
would be
and
beneficial?
trust God for your process.
Right.
Pray about, if you're someone
Yeah.
who's faith-based, pray about what God is leading you to do, because it may not be what I did.
Yeah.
But pray about where he's calling you to go, and to know that it's going to be a process. But I just watched the movie Unsung Hero. I don't know if you've seen it or heard of it. Um,
Unsung hero.
yeah, Hero. It's the story of Rebecca St. James, who was a music artist when I came to know the Lord.
Mm.
And she sings the song "Beautiful, Beautiful in your Time," and it just got me really emotional in her story. But in my story, I just feel like it is beautiful what God has done with a very traumatic. I was disabled 27 years,
Wow.
homebound for 10, couldn't walk for a lot of that time. Well, um, and what he's done. I walked 12 miles in Vegas last week with friends. We did like
Mm.
the 27,000, steps we were monitoring. Um, I mean,
Wow.
3 years ago, I could barely walk. My
Wow.
vertebrae would go out of alignment. And so even though my body's still peeling away a tiny, tiny bit, which has nothing to do with Lyme anymore, just right, bacteria took some of the loads in my body,
Mm.
and repair work that has to go on. It's just so beautiful to me what God has done with my journey, and allowed me to come alongside others who are ready to do the work, and to support them and act as a guide. But they still make the decisions about what they want to do. But I'm listening to, where they want to be, and discerning how we can get there. But I want to give people hope that if you're struggling and you've been struggling for a year, 5 years, 20 years, you can reverse that. The longer you've been sick, it's going to take longer.
Right.
But there's no reason you can't get better from
And
chronic
it's
Lyme.
worth it. You're worth it.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
like we it's crazy how we become the disease. Kind of like your post even here. It's okay to notice symptoms. It's not okay to focus on symptoms, because in a sense that you become your illness, and
Well,
you're
and I
not
was
your illness.
definitely there. I was there, right? I was
Same.
all about my Lyme, all about my
Yes.
pain, all about my suffering. And I had to shift my mindset. And that shift happened with working with a biblical counselor for a year, as I was processing
Mm.
27 years of illness, and angry. I was angry and I was
Right.
angry at God. And that was my brain retraining, was the God's
Yes.
word. That's not everybody's brain retraining, and that's okay. But I think that prepared my nervous system to be
Mhm.
able to start to heal, because it does start with the nervous system. And if you're in mold,
Right.
your nervous system is dysregulated. And sometimes we're dysregulated for other reasons like trauma. So, I mean, that's definitely a priority when I work with people that I didn't mention. Nervous system is the first thing I
Ugh.
assess,
To
but it's very
offload
easy.
all of that. God is there to just take it all. And it's such a blessing to where, yes, we now are ready. Like our bodies are ready to heal and experience this existence.
And to trust him in the process, because there is, I mean, the journey is not a straight line. It's more like a mess, right? Of like a
Right.
roller coaster. It feels like, or at least my journey felt like a roller coaster. But the fact that I knew God was with me
Yes.
and he was going to guide me, and just to let go of my desires of what I wanted to accomplish as a person, as a coach, because I was coaching while I was sick and healing. And just, if I had a bad day, it was okay to rest and be gracious to myself and pull back.
Mm.
Um, but definitely that's huge. I don't know if you want to hear of some of my favorite tools or if we want to just save that for another time, but because it sounded like we were winding down.
Well, I'd love to hear them. Let's hear some of your favorite tools.
Well, cell core is definitely a favorite tool, but the regenerative nutrition, and people can reach out if they want to know more. Happy to
Yes.
get on a discovery call and assess, what's good for
Okay.
them. Cell core is huge. The two things I love is this Avini Nano Silver, which I've affiliated with a company. It's the only silver
Mm.
out there that I have found that kills mold,
Wow.
parasites, viruses, and bacteria, and it will not cause a herx. So
Oh, wow.
if people are really toxic, I can bring down their loads without them causing symptoms. So we have less killing or die off to deal with later. I didn't have this in the beginning of my journey. I had it when I was like no longer sick. So it was
That
helpful,
a
but
spray?
it's a spray, but you can just drink it. You
Okay.
usually take 1 to 2 ounces, and this is a 4 ounce bottle, or you can do like 5 sprays a day. But
Okay.
if people's loads are high, it'll bring it down, but you have to take it with a zeolite. So I use their company zeolite cell defender, because when things are dying, you're releasing heavy metals, and we need to mop them up with a zeolite, and that'll usually doesn't cause any symptoms unless the dose is too high. So that for people who are really sick and toxic has been huge. And this is crazy. I don't know if you've ever seen me wear this device. It's a PEMF device. I had really wanted amp coil and I couldn't because of my spinal cord stimulator. I couldn't do amp coil, but you just put your feet on it. And it's pulse electromagnetic field and terahertz frequency. And so the research, there's nothing that does the two together, but it's like a home device. And when I was going through nerve repair, the pain was just so over the top. 10 days using that device twice a day for a half hour, my nerve pain was gone.
Wow.
I was still muscle testing that I was having nerve repair, but I stopped needing all the herbal support for the pain.
Wow.
It breaks up biofilm. So I've had to sort of use it not every day, because if I break up biofilm, then my body's killing whatever's being released from the biofilm because I'm so alkaline. And then I go through die off and I just need a break from the die off symptoms. But it'll bring down inflammation in the body. It will charge the cell, like shake it, so it can open up and receive nutrition and let go of toxins. So when I have clients who can't take supplements, usually they can do this and the foot device. And I've had clients' loads come down in 90 days, what took me 16 months to do just with food and herbs. And I'm
Wow.
just being blown away. But I added these into what I'm doing right at the
How,
end.
do you
At
mind
the end.
saying how much that PEMF device is? I know some of them can get
Oh,
spendy.
yeah. Yeah, it's 1230.
1230. Okay.
1230, 1,230. Um, and I think we need tools that we can do at home. Like I was going for lymph massage at the end of the journey because so
Yes.
much was leaving my body, and this I stopped needing to do the lymph massage. So I like tools that people can bring in. And the other thing that's really unusual is this product, Immunical. It's a precursor to glutathione production, and it's actually in the PDR, the physician's desk reference. It supports the body making its own glutathione, and I'd much rather give somebody something that's whole food, natural, no additives, no junk in it. Wow. It's a powder that you put into applesauce or dairy-free yogurt, but it'll support your body making its own glutathione, and there's been 80 clinical studies on it. So really great, like supporting the liver, the gallbladder. But a lot of people, IV glutathione is, it's man-made, it's manufactured. It doesn't do what this does in the body, because this will make glutathione and store it in your liver for when you need it. So the regenerative approach is bringing in tools and things that we're supporting your body naturally, and we're not adding additives and chemicals or prescription drugs that add to the toxic burden of the body if we can avoid it, right? Sometimes we need certain things at certain points of the journey, but those are like my favorites. And I wish I had the Immunical and the Nano Silver and the foot device at the beginning of my journey, because I think I might have even gotten there faster. Than I did, but it's been really fun. I've had some clients who will sign up to work with me for 90 days and to see where they're getting, and the muscle testing, their toxic loads, their loads are 50 to 60% lower in 90 days. And I'm like, I wasn't there for a good 16 months. So I'm blown away by that.
Well, you sure are a wealth of knowledge, and I'm just appreciative, because this is just another avenue and resource for people to tap into, that there's hope at the end of this. You're living proof. I'm living proof. And that roller coaster, it's insane. At times you just feel like you're going to fly off. It's out of control. But I am happy to report that when you start going down the right healing path for you, it milds out, and it's not threatening anymore. And then slowly you like climb out of the woods and you can breathe freely, and life is back in you. You got excitement again for the things you lost, that lost its luster. So hang in there no matter where you're at. And I just know we are going to find that wide path for us all. And there are big things coming around the corner. I just know it. I feel it. And especially if folks can open up their hearts and their being to our greatest counselor, our creator, the God of love, Jesus Christ. Like, I kept that door personally closed to my own detriment for far too long. And it wasn't until I sought that relationship personally that not only my eyes, but my heart was opened. And that to this day has been the greatest gift, the greatest tool, and has led to such blessings, just like this very conversation. So I just hope that breathes some light into some folks. Do you have any other burning desires?
I would just say, I would say I encourage people, if you believe in God and Christ, pray about how you should proceed in your treatment. And even if someone's giving you a recommendation, a health coach or a physician, seek the Lord. He knows your body. He knows what you're dealing with. I've watched him provide for my clients financially for their mold journey, their house remediation, their supplements. I've watched him do that in my own journey. So trust him to provide for what you need, and do not panic, which I've done as a woman, where you just freak out when you know what you need to spend on the healing journey. And I look back at how God provided, and it blows my mind. We spent about $250,000 to date. My husband was a pastor, and I was disabled and not working until 4 years ago. And God's used my health coaching to provide for my journey now. But I look back and I think, I don't know how you did this, Lord. On paper, it makes no sense how much we spent based on how much we were making. So trust God and his timing to provide and know that this is a process. But you can get better. There's no reason you can't get better.
Well, that's beautifully said, Heather. With that, I'll just do a quick sign off. Hang on the line. I'd like to chat with you a bit after. Folks, thank you so much for joining us today. I sure hope this breathes some light into your life, that there are better days ahead. We love you. Thank you for tuning in and supporting us here on A Muzzle Chat. Be sure to check the comments, not just comments, the description below, because we'll be adding Heather's webpage, probably some socials that you could reach out, get in touch with her. But till next time, God bless. Take care.